We all know the criminal justice system hands down sentences every day. These are 20 cases where what someone did was so extreme, so calculated, or so far beyond anything most people can comprehend, that the sentence handed down had to match it. Daniel Marsh.
Major developments in the high-profile murder case of convicted killer Daniel Marsh.
Daniel Marsh was 15 years old and living in Davis, California, when he decided to finally act on violent urges he had been carrying since the age of 10. On the night of the 13th of April, 2013, after what he later described to investigators as simply having had enough, he dressed in all black, put on a face mask, taped the bottoms of his shoes to avoid leaving footprints, pulled on a pair of gloves, and armed himself with a 6-inch buck knife. He then spent the next several hours walking the streets of Davis, checking between 40 and 50 homes for any open window or unlocked door. He eventually found one at the condo of Oliver Chip Northup, 87, and his wife Claudia Maupin, 76, who lived just 2 doors down from Marsh's own father. Marsh cut open the window screen, climbed inside, and waited in the living room until he heard snoring from the bedroom. The attack that followed left Northup with 61 stab wounds and Maupin with 67. After killing both of them, Marsh mutilated their bodies. He later told investigators the entire experience had given him a feeling of pure happiness that lasted for weeks. Forensic psychologists who examined Marsh scored him 35.8 out of 40 on the psychopathy checklist, a scale measuring psychopathic traits where 40 is the highest possible score. For comparison, Jeffrey Dahmer scored a 23 on the same scale. He was tried as an adult, convicted of first-degree murder, and sentenced to 52 years to life in prison in 2014. Demetrios Pagourtzis.
I feel like, people should, watch people more, make sure that they're okay and talk to them. Because this kid that I used to talk to the shooter himself, and he used to not seem like he'd do that. Like he'd just snap out of nowhere.
On the 18th of May, 2018, 17-year-old Demetrios Pagourtzis walked into Santa Fe High School in Santa Fe, Texas, carrying his father's shotgun and his mother's .38 caliber handgun. He entered an art classroom at around 7:30 a.m. and opened fire. A staff member pulled the fire alarm mid-shooting, which caused most of the building to evacuate, but not before the damage was done. 10 people were killed and 13 others were wounded. The 8 students who lost their lives were Chris Stone, Aaron McLeod, Angelique Ramirez, Jared Black, Kimberly Vaughn, Sabika Sheikh, Christian Garcia, and Shana Fisher. The 2 teachers killed were Cynthia Tisdale and Ann Perkins. One witness recalled that between shots, Pagourtzis was singing to himself. Police took him into custody that same morning. The shooting became the 8th deadliest school shooting in U.S. history. Pagourtzis was charged with capital murder and aggravated assault against a peace officer. But as of 2026, he has never stood trial. He was first declared incompetent to stand trial in November 2019 and has been recommitted to the maximum security unit at North Texas State Hospital every year since. Because he was 17 at the time of the attack, he cannot legally be sentenced to death or life without the possibility of parole under Texas law. If he is ever found competent and convicted, the maximum he faces is life in prison with parole eligibility after 40 years. As of now, he remains institutionalized with no trial date in sight. Shad Cellers.
If all you can see is that someone has hurt somebody, that someone has killed somebody, that someone is dangerous, then you want that person dead. That person deserves to die. And
on the 8th of September, 1985, 16-year-old Shad Cellers walked into a Circle K convenience store in Oklahoma City alongside his friend Richard Howard. The clerk working that night was Robert Paul Bauer, 35. Bauer had previously refused to sell alcohol to Howard on another occasion, but that turned out not to be the real reason Cellers shot him. Cellers later admitted the killing was driven by curiosity, wanting to know what it felt like to take someone's life. He shot Bauer twice, laughed about it on the way out, and walked away. Police assumed it was a robbery gone wrong and the case went cold. 6 months passed before Cellers killed again. On the 5th of March 1986, he stripped down to just his underwear to avoid getting blood on his clothes, crept into the bedroom of his mother, Vonda Bellofato, 32, and his stepfather, Paul Lee Bellofato, 43, while they were asleep, and shot both of them in the head. His mother woke from the first shot, and he shot her again. He later said he had been angry with her over her interference in his relationship with his girlfriend. After the shootings, he rearranged the scene to look like a break-in. Howard eventually came forward and testified against him. Cellers was arrested, tried as an adult, and convicted of all 3 murders. He was sentenced to death in 1986. While on death row, Cellers converted to Christianity, made media appearances, and attracted international attention, but every appeal was ultimately denied. On the 4th of February 1999, Cellers was executed by lethal injection at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary at the age of 29, becoming the only person executed in the United States for a crime committed at age 16 since 1959. Jordan Wade.
Jordan Wade was sentenced to 172 years in prison.
On the evening of the 13th of June 2015, 16-year-old Jordan Wade and 27-year-old Robert Lee Adams arrived at a house on East Hudson Street in the South Linden neighborhood of Columbus, Ohio, looking to commit a robbery. Inside were 5 people: Michael Balla, 41, Daniel Craig Sharp, 26, Angela D. Harrison, 35, Taya N. Nelson, 18, and a 15-year-old girl. Adams and Wade herded all of them down into the basement at gunpoint. Wade had an extensive prior criminal record, having been placed on juvenile probation multiple times without ever successfully completing it. Once the group was in the basement, Adams turned to Wade and asked whether he should kill all of them, and Wade told him to go ahead. Adams shot Sharp in the head first. He then ordered Balla to keep his head down, and when Balla tried to wrestle the gun away and escape up the stairs, Adams kept shooting until he went down. Harrison was shot while begging for her life. Nelson was also killed. The 15-year-old girl was shot in the head but survived, managed to crawl out of the basement on her own, and later became the key witness in the case against both men. The shooting had been tied to a robbery over drugs. Wade was tried as an adult and convicted of 4 counts of aggravated murder, as well as attempted murder, aggravated robbery, kidnapping, and gang-related specifications. Robert Lee Adams pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. On the 13th of September 2016, Wade was sentenced to 172.5 years to life in prison. Because he was a juvenile at the time of the murders, the death penalty was not an option.
According to police, Frick ran her car into 38-year-old Michelle Muir at the intersection of East 6th and Wallace Streets last August.
Walker. 16-year-old Gavin Smith had been forbidden by his family from seeing his girlfriend, 17-year-old Rebecca Walker. The home he shared with his mother, stepfather, and 2 younger brothers in Elkview, West Virginia, had become increasingly controlled, with locks placed on interior doors, including the refrigerator, and COVID-19 restrictions cutting off much of his outside contact. So, on the night of the 9th of December 2020, he decided to remove the obstacle entirely. Smith shot and killed his mother, Risa Mae Saunders, 39, and his stepfather, Daniel Dale Long, 37, while they slept, shooting both in the head. He then killed his 12-year-old brother, Gage Ripley. His 3-year-old brother, Jamison Long, had been hiding under his crib. Smith killed him too. Another family member discovered all 4 bodies 4 days later. Throughout the murders, Rebecca Walker had been on a live video call with Smith. She testified in court that she had urged him to hurry up and do it because she wanted to be with him. The screen, she said, went dark once he started shooting. After the killings, Smith hid in the woods before moving to Walker's grandmother's home, where police eventually found and arrested him. Walker pleaded guilty to 4 counts of accessory after the fact to first-degree murder and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Smith was convicted and sentenced to 3 life terms with mercy, 40 years for the second-degree murder of his 12-year-old brother, and an additional 10 years for firearm use, all running consecutively. The judge noted that mercy was only granted because state law required it given Smith's age. In June 2025, the West Virginia Supreme Court vacated Smith's convictions and ordered a new trial, citing a procedural error in how the jury had been instructed. Sky Bouche. Sky Bouche had been flagged by both local law enforcement and the FBI since 2013, when he was 15 and had posted online threats about carrying out a school shooting. On the 20th of April 2018, the 19th anniversary of the Columbine massacre, Bouche arrived at Forest High School in Ocala, Florida, a campus he had previously attended as a student. He was carrying a guitar case. Inside was a sawed-off 1.6 gauge shotgun. He had also strapped on a black tactical vest and packed a backpack with extra shotgun shells and gloves. Bouche fired one shot through a classroom door. The blast struck 17-year-old student Evan Eckenroth in the ankle, injuring him. After firing, Bouche dropped the gun, walked into a nearby classroom, and sat down calmly at a desk. He was talking with a teacher when the school resource officer arrived. Deputy Jim Long heard the gunshot at 8:39 a.m. By 8:42 a.m., Bouche was in handcuffs. Eckenroth survived and made a full recovery. In jailhouse interviews, Bouche said the shooting was a cry for help. He told deputies he had felt ignored and had wanted to go to jail. Records showed he had also been researching mass shootings and targeted school attacks online in the days beforehand. Bouche was 19 at the time of the shooting, so adult sentencing applied in full. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison with a mandatory minimum of 25 years before he can be considered for parole, followed by 30 years of probation after release. Sierra Halseth.
6, you're going to be sentenced to 19 to 48 months in the Nevada Department of Corrections, and that's ordered to run concurrent to count 5.
Sierra Halseth was 16 years old and living in Las Vegas, Nevada, when her father, 45-year-old Daniel Halseth, forbade her from continuing a relationship with Aaron Guerrero, who was 18. The two had been together since mid-2020 and had been making plans to run away to Los Angeles together. When their parents shut that down, Daniel Halseth became the target. On the 8th of April 2021, Guerrero left his home and met up with Sierra. The two spent the day buying supplies: gloves, bleach, and saws. Daniel's body was discovered the following day in the garage of his northwest Las Vegas home. He had been stabbed more than 70 times. Sierra and Guerrero had also attempted to dismember the body using a chainsaw and a circular saw, placed what remained into a sleeping bag, and started a fire in the living room in an attempt to destroy evidence. The two fled to Salt Lake City, where they were caught 4 days later by transit officers who found them riding light rail without tickets. While searching their phones, police found a video the couple had filmed together 3 days after the murder, in which Guerrero casually mentions that they had killed somebody and Halseth is heard laughing. In May 2022, both Sierra and Guerrero pleaded guilty to 9 counts each, including murder with a deadly weapon, first-degree arson, robbery, and fraudulent use of a credit card. On the 20th of October 2022, both were sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 22 years. Sierra is currently housed at the Florence McClure Women's Correctional Center in North Las Vegas. Samantha Grigg. On the night of the 15th of February 2014, 18-year-old Samantha Grigg drove 2 of her associates, Tyrell Bredenitz and Brendan Haim, to the apartment of Dustin Frolker, a 19-year-old Michigan State University student. The plan was to rob him. Once Frolker was inside the SUV, Bredenitz and Haim attacked him. Grigg later told investigators she had not known about the plan until after she was already in the vehicle, but once she did, she kept driving. The beating was severe enough that Frolker made the decision to jump from the moving SUV while it was traveling along Interstate 69 at up to 60 miles per hour. His body was found by a passing motorist that night in Bath Township, near the East Lansing exit. About $800 had been taken from him. Frolker had been an aspiring musician. He was 19 years old. Grigg agreed to cooperate and testify against her co-defendants. In April 2014, she pleaded guilty to manslaughter and unarmed robbery. The original charge had been murder. Grigg apologized in court and said it broke her heart. She was sentenced to 6 to 15 years in prison. Bredenitz was charged with first-degree murder. Haim was undergoing a competency evaluation before proceedings against him could move forward. Craig Price.
I'm going to kill every officer I can get my hands on, just like I killed those little kids. New chilling threats from serial killer Craig Price just months ago.
Craig Price committed his first murder on the 27th of July 1987 in the Buttonwoods neighborhood of Warwick, Rhode Island. He was 13 years old. That night, he broke into the home of Rebecca Spencer, 27, a neighbor who lived just 2 houses from his own. He took a knife from her kitchen and stabbed her 58 times. The killing went unsolved for 2 years. On the 1st of September 1989, Price was 15. High on marijuana and LSD, he broke into the home of another neighbor, Joan Heaton, 39, intending, he said, to steal a VCR. When Joan woke up, he stabbed her 57 times. Her 10-year-old daughter Jennifer, who witnessed her mother being attacked in the kitchen, was stabbed 62 times. Her 8-year-old daughter Melissa was stabbed 30 times and had her skull crushed with a kitchen stool. The knife handles broke during the attacks, leaving the blades lodged inside the bodies. Price was arrested about 2 weeks later after investigators noticed a cut on his hand and found the murder weapons hidden in his family's shed. During interrogation with his mother present, he confessed to all 4 killings without remorse and at one point mimicked the sounds of the dying girls to detectives. The legal problem was significant. Price had been arrested 1 month before his 16th birthday, which meant Rhode Island law required he be sentenced as a juvenile and released at age 21. He reportedly told investigators he was going to make history. The state changed the law afterward, but it could not be applied to him retroactively. Price has continued to commit violent crimes in custody. In 2019, he was sentenced to 25 years in Florida for stabbing a fellow inmate with a homemade 5-inch blade. Savon Schmoose
would go on to violate his probation for possessing alcohol and then have to spend several weekends in jail, according to court records.
McKenna Hilton was 18 years old when she was killed in August 2016. Her half-brother, Savon Schmoose, was 16. The two shared the same father, David Schmoose, in the Grand Rapids, Michigan area. In 2010, David Schmoose had pleaded guilty to photographing McKenna, who was 12 at the time, as she was in the shower and was given probation. The family environment after that conviction was its own disturbing picture. On the 18th of August 2016, Savon strangled McKenna to death at their father's apartment. He then transported her body and left it in a wooded area near Emerald Lake in Grand Rapids Township. A dog walker found her body that same day. Savon was charged as an adult with open murder and initially faced life in prison without the possibility of parole. In October 2017, Savon Schmoose pleaded guilty to murder. Not long after, David Schmoose, the father shared by both the victim and the perpetrator, was also convicted of child pornography charges connected to the 2010 incident involving McKenna and was sentenced to prison. On the 30th of October 2017, Savon Schmoose was sentenced to 40 to 100 years in prison. Brandon McInerney.
Both middle schoolers. Prosecutors saying Brandon is a white supremacist gang member who killed Larry because he was gay.
Brandon McInerney was 14 years old and in the 8th grade at E.O. Green Junior High School in Oxnard, California. His classmate, Lawrence Larry King, 15, was openly gay and had recently started wearing makeup and heels to school, which teachers and administrators permitted under federal law, protecting students' rights to express their identity. In the weeks before the shooting, teachers and students observed growing tension between King and McInerney. Defense attorneys would later argue that King had been making repeated, unwanted advances toward McInerney in front of other students, which had been humiliating. Prosecutors argued that King was not the aggressor and that McInerney had specifically targeted him for his sexuality, pointing to Nazi-inspired drawings investigators found connected to McInerney. On the 12th of February 2008, McInerney came to school with a .22 caliber handgun concealed in his backpack. He sat down directly behind King in the school's computer lab, pulled the gun out, and shot King twice in the back of the head in front of their classmates. He dropped the gun back into his bag and walked out of the building. King was placed on life support and died 2 days later, on Valentine's Day. McInerney was charged as an adult with first-degree murder and a hate crime enhancement. His first trial, in 2011, ended in a mistrial after a hung jury. Before a second trial could start, he took a plea deal. In November 2011, McInerney pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and voluntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to 21 years in prison in December of that year, with no credit for time served and no possibility of early release for good behavior. He was eligible for release around 2029. Joey McVey.
You shot your mom. Yeah, she did.
On the evening of the 2nd of January 2011, an argument broke out in a home near Big Prairie in Holmes County, Ohio. A mother was asking her son to bring firewood inside the house. He did not want to. Her son was 10 years old. His name was Joseph Joey McVey, and at some point during the argument, he picked up a .22 caliber rifle that had belonged to his late grandfather and shot his mother, Deborah McVey, 46, once in the back of the head. She was found lying face down on the living room floor when paramedics arrived and was pronounced dead at the scene. Joey's 15-year-old sister Shauna was in the home during the shooting. She ran out of the house afterward. Joey walked to a neighbor's home and told her what had happened. A 911 call captured him, saying he had shot his mother and asking them to come as fast as they could. He was arrested that night and charged as a juvenile with murder. A Holmes County judge ruled him incompetent to stand trial in August 2011, citing anxiety, depression, a learning disability, and difficulty communicating with his attorneys. He was later found competent, and in 2013, Joey entered a guilty plea in exchange for the murder charge being reduced. The judge sentenced him within the juvenile system, meaning his placement would end no later than his 21st birthday, and directed him to a treatment facility. Jaime Silvonek.
Bonnie teenager Jaime Silvonek, who pleaded guilty to killing her mother in 2015, now wants a trial.
By early 2015, 14-year-old Jaime Silvonek had been in a relationship with 21-year-old Army specialist Caleb Barnes for several months. Her mother, Cheryl Silvonek, 54, found out about the relationship and threatened to report Barnes to police for having sexual contact with her underage daughter. So Jaime began sending Barnes a series of text messages, making plans to have her mother killed. The relationship between Barnes and Jaime had reportedly started online when she was 13. Jaime would later say in court that she had been so devoted to Barnes that she had been willing to arrange her own mother's death to protect what they had. On the night of the 15th of March 2015, all three attended a concert together and drove home afterward. When they arrived at the family's home in Upper Macungie Township, Pennsylvania, Barnes stabbed Cheryl Silvonek in her car in the driveway. They then buried her body in a shallow grave and submerged Cheryl's car in a nearby pond. Police arrested both of them within hours. Jaime pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and criminal conspiracy and was sentenced to 35 years to life in prison. Barnes was tried separately and convicted of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life without parole, plus 22 to 44 years on additional charges, telling him directly in court that he had shown cowardice and inhumanity and would be removed from society permanently. Jaime has since filed appeals, arguing she was denied the chance to be tried as a juvenile. Those efforts have so far been unsuccessful, and as of 2025, she remains incarcerated at the Muncie Correctional Facility in Pennsylvania. Natasha Ellis.
Now 16 and a half years old and looks like any other teenage girl. But that's what's so eerie.
On the 23rd of May 2019, 15-year-old Natasha Ellis and a 13-year-old friend she had met through school planned a coordinated attack on the younger girl's family at their home in New Carlisle, Ohio, a small city northeast of Dayton. Investigators said the two had been messaging each other on Instagram in the weeks and days before the attack, coordinating details all the way up to the moment it began. Ellis carried the attack out alone, but according to Clark County Sheriff's deputies, the planning had been done together. Ellis entered the home and stabbed Lee A. Moore, 36, the mother of her younger accomplice. Moore died from multiple stab wounds. The father, Paul Greer, and the family's 17-year-old son were also stabbed, but both survived. In an interview with sheriff's investigators, Ellis claimed she believed the family had been abusive toward her friend and that killing them was the only solution. Prosecutors said the claim was unverified. She was tried as an adult. In June 2020, Ellis pleaded guilty to murder and attempted murder, with 2 additional charges of aggravated murder dropped as part of the plea. She also agreed to testify against her 13-year-old accomplice if that case went to trial. The judge sentenced her to 15 years to life for the murder and 7 to 10 years for the attempted murder, running consecutively. The minimum time before she can be considered for parole is 22 years. Ellis later appealed the transfer to adult court. An appellate court found an error in how the juvenile court had handled the transfer, and a new trial was ordered in 2022. As of available records, her case remains pending. Morgan Leopard.
Said, oh, he's gonna call the cops, and Toby said, no, the hell you wait, and boom, punched him right in the face.
Morgan Leopard was 15 years old when she ran away from home with 22-year-old Toby Lowry in 2008. The two ended up in Melrose, Florida, a rural town in Putnam County, and it was there they decided to rob James Thomas Stewart, a 66-year-old disabled man who had been born without hands. The attack went well beyond robbery. Leopard and Lowry beat Stewart with metal curtain rods and stabbed him with a kitchen knife. When he was still alive and unable to defend himself, Lowry told Leopard to find something to finish the job. She found a plastic garbage bag. During the attack, Stewart asked them why they were going to kill him. After the murder, they stole his truck and fled Florida. They picked up a hitchhiker along the way, who spent several days traveling with them before later testifying that Leopard appeared to be the dominant one of the two. Stewart's body was not found for several days. An Amber Alert was issued for Leopard, and the couple was tracked down and arrested in Texas about a week after the killing. During police interviews, Leopard laughed. She described herself in those sessions as a blue-eyed devil. She was convicted of first-degree murder, burglary with battery, and robbery with a deadly weapon. Her original sentence was life without parole, but it was revised in 2016 under a U.S. Supreme Court ruling prohibiting mandatory life without parole sentences for juvenile offenders. At the resentencing, the judge still handed Leopard a life term, but with the possibility of a parole review after 25 years. Toby Lowry, who had pleaded guilty earlier to avoid the death penalty, also received a life sentence.